Good morning. If you could all take your seats, this is the Health Tech competition. I would say the most exciting part of our program, but I'm a bit biased. My name's Jeff McCalk. I'm with the Center for Health Technology and Innovation. It's my pleasure to introduce to you the CEO of the American Heart Association, Nancy Brown.
Hello, all. Thank you so much for being here. I have to agree, this is the place where it happens. So thank you guys for being here. I am Nancy Brown, CEO of the American Heart Association. Welcome to our 8th annual Health Tech competition at Scientific Sessions. This event holds a special place for all of us at the AHA, especially our Center for Health Technology and Innovation. It serves as a platform to highlight groundbreaking technologies against the backdrop of the Super Bowl of scientific meetings where the cardiovascular and scientific community come together. We are thrilled with the number of submissions we have received, nearly 60 this year, marking the highest number ever. We have only 5 finalists. It was a very tough task, who will present solutions designed to better prevent, treat, or diagnose heart disease and stroke. My special thanks to my dearest friends, Dr. Bob Harrington, I saw Bob a moment ago, and Dr. Eric Peterson, who I have not yet seen, who will be the lead judges for us today. Dr. Harrington is past president of the AHA, and these days is the dean at the Weill Cornell School of Medicine, so thank you. And Dr. Peterson is vice provost and associate dean for clinical research at UT Southwestern. For the finalists, you are pitching to the best and brightest of our AHA family who are serving as judges today. And I want to give a special thanks to my dearest and most beloved friend, Star Jones, for being here with us today. Star, thank you. I also want to give a special thanks to the Laerdal Million Lives Fund for sponsoring the competition and for their partnership over so many years. Jeff Tross, the managing partner, is here. Jeff, could you stand and be recognized? He will also be serving as a judge. And last but not least, let's thank all the amazing innovators for their incredible work. So on with the show. There is Dr. Peterson. Hello. I will now turn it over to Dr. Harrington. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Welcome, Star. We're glad to have you back this year as one of the judges. If I could get the judges to start walking up on stage, because what we'd like to do is have you each introduce yourself and just tell us, you know, where you're from. Are you an academic? Are you a practicing doctor? Are you a venture capitalist? Are you an inventor? Just give us a sense of who you are. Let's start walking across Lee and let them know who you are.
Hi, my name is Star Jones, and I'm a well-known I'm Dr. Lee Schwam. I'm the Chief Digital Health Officer for the Yale New Haven Health System and an Associate Dean for Digital Strategy and Transformation, and delighted to be here.
Good morning. I'm the Heather between two Lees. Heather Provino. I am a managing partner at the Scanlon Group and also CEO of Curate Health. Happy to be here.
Hi, everyone. I'm Star Jones. I am a heart disease survivor and thriver, and I am national volunteer for the American Heart Association for the past 12 years. Woo!
Good morning. Lee Shapiro, managing partner at Seven Wire Ventures and a national board member at the American Heart Association.
Craig Beam. I'm president of Beam & Associates from Orange County, California, and I'm former chairman of the board of the Heart Association.
Hi, my name is Murad Fadim. I'm a heart failure cardiologist at Duke University and involved in device innovation.
My name is Jeff Trost. I'm the managing partner of the Million Lives Fund, a venture capital fund focused on life-saving digital health technologies.
Thank you. Hey, I'm Ken Nelson from Dallas, Texas, partner in the MedTech Advantage Fund. We're investing in alumni companies of MedTech Innovator, which is the biggest MedTech digital health startup accelerator globally. Prior to that, commercialized iRhythm, Biotelemetry, and Barty Diagnostics.
Hi, I'm Brian Benson. I'm the VP for Strategic Alliances at MedTech Innovator, supporting some of the most amazing companies from around the world reach the patients that need them most. We're excited to start our collaboration with AHA and really looking forward to supporting the companies today as well as moving forward in the next few years. Thank you.
Eric Peterson, cardiologist, UT Southwestern Clinical Research, and AHA volunteer. Thank you.
All right, let's let the judging begin. So I'll turn it back over to Jeff. Thank you.
This one?
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Right?
Thank you so much, Dr. Harrington. Are we ready? Is my mic on? Okay, good. All right, excellent. My name's Jeff. I'm here to help you through this process. This is very exciting. So we do our pitch competition a little bit differently here at the AHA. We don't think that 5 minutes is enough time to talk about how your company's awesome, how your solution's revolutionary and innovative, how you're going to save lives and have impact. So we break it up into 2 sessions. Today we're talking about business, we're talking about impact. Tomorrow, at the same time, same place, some slightly different judges will be, unfortunately you'll have to deal with me again tomorrow. We'll be talking about the science and the evidence and how these companies with their innovative solutions line up with AHA's mission for better outcomes around cardiovascular and stroke health. Each of the companies will get 7 minutes to talk about themselves in the nicest way possible. And then the judges will have 10 minutes to ask thoughtful, provoking, clarifying, hopefully provocative, maybe a little bit edgy, aggressive questions to keep things exciting. And then we'll be collating and capturing information from today. We'll get information from tomorrow. And then on Monday, we'll have the award ceremony. And there will be 3 companies that will be recognized. An overall winner, a winner of today's pitch competition, and a winner of tomorrow's science competition. And the other 2 will just get lots of smiles and hugs, and because everyone's awesome. We're so excited for everyone to participate. Are we ready? Are my contestants ready? Are my finalists ready? Is Zach ready? Where's Zach? There he, okay, all right. So, we're gonna practice right now. Can you all applaud for me? Great, a little bit more, okay. All right, a question before we begin. How many people in the audience are entrepreneurs, have started a company? Excellent, excellent. How many of you have had to pitch in front of a large amount of people? You know it kind of sucks, right? It's not fun. So, I want everyone to be warm, I want everyone to be receptive. And for our first finalist, Eindhoven.
All right, awesome. Can everyone hear me well? All right, I am Zach with Eindhoven. Okay. Get through the first. Oh, these are not my slides. Yeah, sorry. Should I click through to mine?
You know, with a technology competition, there always has to be a problem with the technology. And I'm glad we're getting it out of the way right at the beginning.
But these are not.
All right.
You have them memorized, though, don't you, Zach? You don't need.
I might.
Someone else's.
And I'll let you go 14 seconds extra once we're ready to go.
Any luck with this?
I
guess.
All right, one moment.
I've done debates like that.
This is where I have to fill up time. How many people flew in from the West Coast? Nice. Okay. How's that time difference treating you? A little bit chillier, probably, out here than there. People from the East Coast? Show of hands. How many people took Amtrak? Wow, keeping our government alive. Great. How many people flew? Okay. You like the Philly airport? I hear it's nice. I took the train myself. All right, Zach, you're up.
All right, awesome. Thanks, y'all. My name is Zach. I'm a co-founder of Eindhoven. With Eindhoven, we are saving young lives with machine learning. Quickly on disclosures, I'm a co-founder and shareholder of Eindhoven and a co-founder and employee of our nonprofit called Who We Play For. So our story starts in a small town in Florida where soccer was the most important thing in our lives from kindergarten through high school. We were lucky to develop a really close group of friends through soccer, and then fast forward to our 10th grade year of high school in 2007, and one of our best friends, Rafe Macron, passed away in front of us from sudden cardiac arrest during high school soccer practice. At the time, everything that could go wrong did go wrong, We started with the Heimlich maneuver because nobody knew what to do in an emergency. There was only one person on the field who knew CPR who was then able to start. We went to get the AED. It was behind a locked door in the gymnasium, and the ambulance got stuck behind a locked gate trying to get to us. And so Rafe passed the next day. We thought this was 1 in a million. We started the Play for Rafe Foundation. We did CPR training, AED placement, emergency action plans. And we were lucky to go to college together. And there we met other nonprofits like us through the Parent Heart Watch Network. And we would come to learn that sudden cardiac arrest is actually the #1 killer of student athletes. It's the #1 cause of death on school campuses. And the really important statistic that drives us is that 1 in 300 kids has a detectable life-threatening heart condition. And so for Rafe, he had hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. If he would have received an electrocardiogram screening after a lifetime of past sports physicals, he would have taken a 2-minute test, paid $20 to who we play for, and he would have had a 95% chance of detection. And so this spurred us to start Who We Play For. Who We Play For is a nonprofit that is focused on advocacy and providing heart screenings. We grew into the largest heart screening nonprofit in the United States. We've done over 250,000 heart screenings, and we've saved a few hundred lives. And that leads us to the problem that we know well, which is that sudden cardiac arrest is a leading cause of death for kids, and that many of these deaths could be prevented with an electrocardiogram combined with expert-level interpretation. And we know through 10 years of experience that the use of pediatric ECGs is too complex and there's too many to do to scale with human interpretation in the United States. That also leads us to the size of the problem, which is there's around 40 million kids in the US in our age bracket of 12 to 18 that we target. If you introduce ECGs to their standard sports physical or the youth wellness checkups, it increases the likelihood of detecting deadly conditions by 5 times to 10 times, and ECGs can identify up to 95% of the most deadly conditions. And we know that if we solve the complexities of scaling pediatric ECGs, there's over 100,000 kids in the US who would be identified with potentially deadly heart conditions. So we built our solution to this, which is we built the first ever pediatric and young adult ECG interpretation tool powered by artificial intelligence. It's built to be compatible with any ECG machine. It's built as a software solution, continuous improvement through a constant inflow of data, and it's healthcare industry friendly. We're not taking anyone's jobs, and we're improving clinical outcomes. Quickly on the performance of the solution, we were really lucky to do the major part of the development and validation of the tool with Amazon Web Services Machine Learning Department. This article highlighted here was published by Amazon's Machine Learning Department. And in the yellow, you'll see that we created, quote, a first of its kind machine learning solution capable of identifying SCA risk in pediatric patients. And then in blue, you'll see that it, quote, exceeds human level performance. On the landscape in this space, there's a lot of really exciting advancements in the adult ECG space using artificial intelligence to increase interpretation capabilities. After 10 years in this space and being advised by the leading publishers on this topic, we still haven't seen anyone else working in our area of 12 to 18, and so we're still kind of on our own in this space. Four main verticals we're attacking. Obvious medical providers, that's your pediatricians, your walk-in clinics, the places that do not provide this service now. That's also your big providers like the Walmarts and the CVSs and the Walgreens. And there we offer both, of course, a software solution plus expert software support and overread services. For hospitals, that's more of a licensing attack that we're going for. And then for ECG machine companies, we can be a product software add-on to their existing machines. And then for pharmaceutical and clinical trials, we can immediately increase the standard of pediatric ECG interpretation for their trials. 3 key advantages, I've touched on a few. The first one is, of course, we spent 10 years building the largest heart screening nonprofit in the United States, and we're ready to transition and scale across the US. That middle column is really important. We have a really unique database. Based off our 10 years of work and our advisors in this space, it's a one-of-a-kind database of 400,000 pediatric ECGs that, in its unique characteristic, reflects the normal distribution of the population, which allows for it to be a screening tool. And then, of course, the third column, which we talked about, which was the validation of the MVP with Amazon Web Services. Very lucky to have an incredible founding team. Our CMO is Dr. Bhavya Trivedi. He's an MD, PhD on this topic. He's a pediatric electrophysiologist. Our CEO is my brother Evan, who has been the executive director of Who We Play For 10 years. Our CTO, Clinton, he's an expert machine learning developer. He was actually the person who did CPR on Rafe that day at the practice field. Our CFO, Josh Coughlin, Very lucky to have him. He has 3 previous exits to publicly traded companies, all in the healthcare space. And then I serve as the COO and Chief Compliance Officer. My background is that I'm a healthcare regulatory attorney. 2 advisors to call out that we have an incredible team, but Dr. Jonathan Dresner, who many might know is the leading author on the international criteria. He's the director of sports cardiology at University of Washington, and he's the editor-in-chief of the British Journal of Sports Medicine. And then, of course, Dr. Antonio Polischia, also really famous in this space, one of the international leaders based out of Rome, Italy. Quickly on market potential, this is just for one of our verticals. This is just for in-office use by medical providers. If you use the conservative dollar amount of $10 per ECG, which has been established in some settings in Central Florida, if you scale that across the US, that's $400 million per year, and that's where the 100,000 kids with identified conditions comes from. And that's just one vertical. So in summary, Eindhoven, we're using our 10 years of experience building the largest heart screening nonprofit in the US, our unique database, and our proprietary software to scale heart screenings across the US and internationally. The potential impact is over 100,000 kids just in the US to be identified with potentially deadly heart conditions. And thank you for your time today.
Outstanding. Well done. Grace under pressure. Very nicely done. Judges, do we have any questions? Dr. Harrington?
So your passion is palpable, so kudos to you for doing that. Who's your competition?
Yeah, on that competition slide, there are a few tools that use traditional algorithm in this space, but and we work with those companies like Cardia 2020 but there have been no other even publications that we found over the last 10 years in trying to advance this and bringing AI to the 12 to 18 age range. We like to think in that slide has a data barrier down the middle of it on the landscape slide. We view our database, and our advisors do, as a very solid kind of blocker to competitors. Whereas in the adult space, there are publicly available data sets that you can use to kind of improve as we age up.
Question. Very nice presentation. Thank you for sharing it. I'm curious, when you talk about that this is a $20 procedure, I assume that the ECG is reimbursed to the pediatrician, so you have to train them to kind of do this as a standard of care. But what does it cost them to be able to bring on your service? Because I assume that you're charging them in order to provide this.
Yeah, great question. And that's right. And the $20 point, that is for our nonprofit model, but it's a good data point to start with. For Eindhoven, on that exact question, we spun up a pilot model in the state of Florida called MBK Health. It's just a simple LLC run by our founders for the exact purpose of bringing human backup reads to pediatricians' offices. And so the way, again, it was pilot model, just as quick to market as possible. They pay us around $10 for an overread, the pediatricians do, and the pediatricians can then either bill private health insurance or health insurance, and for those who that's outside the scope of reimbursement, they're able to do cash pay. So we work with the largest walk-in clinic in Central Florida, and then around 5 pediatricians, purely just working out the bugs before we try to scale with Eindhoven.
Yeah, again,
Dr. Schwam.
Great presentation. I will say I think reimbursement for a pediatric EKG for screening a healthy child may or may not be reimbursed in a lot of states, so that's a separate question. But I wanted to understand, the number 1 in 300 seems high to me. Not necessarily high if it's 1 in 300 are screening positive on your algorithm, but I'd like to understand how you develop your reference standard for training your model.
That's right. That's perfect. I tried to click back, but I can't get back to it.
No worries.
Never go back, Zach.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. The citation there is to the Parent Heart Watch, which is a leading voice in sudden cardiac arrest for pediatrics. It is a citation that refers to around 6 different publications, and it's kind of a summary assessment over the overall likelihood. So 1 in 300 is led by people like Dr. Jonathan Dresner on our advisory board. And then, what was the second half of the question?
How you trained your model. What was your reference standard for your training model?
Absolutely. So the international criteria, many will know, is the gold standard in interpretation for this space on the athletic, kind of more active side. And so because we're going into pediatricians' offices, who, of course, not all the patients will be athletes or athletic hearts, what we have done to modify, we do the international criteria with slight additions so that it can catch indications of congenital issues as well. And just for quick context on how it works in a pediatrician's office, they will do the ECG, run the tool, The normal is 99 plus reliable when it says normal. The abnormal comes to our expert panel of physicians for confirmation. And so no child is sent to follow-up care based off the AI tool. It goes through a pediatric electrophysiologist before confirmation.
But how, sorry, just, I apologize, but of those patients who screened positive on that expert trial, how many actually turned out to have a form of heart disease? What was your positive predictive value, or like, how do we know that this abnormal result is actually going to identify children who are truly at risk?
So it calls around 10% of the ECGs, and what we know through published research with international criteria is around 3% follow-up care needed, and so that is where that 10% narrows to the human. That's right.
Ken.
So I'm going to tackle the reimbursement question.
Yeah.
I love that you're tackling this issue. It's a big one. Every time I hear about a student athlete dying, it just kind of, I cringe at it because these are preventable deaths. Have you talked to payers? What kind of traction have you gotten with payers? And when you think about commercializing, how do you get payers on board in addition to having nonprofit funding? Because I think that's going to be the biggest hurdle to overcome.
Absolutely, yeah.
So can you repeat the question? I think we're having a little mic. Can you just repeat the question back to the crowd?
Yeah, and that's good practice. I believe you're asking about reimbursement models for in-office use and then just a general interest from payers that we've interacted with. And so on that topic, the pilot model in Florida has been extremely helpful. So right now with the pediatricians' offices we work with, they all, just from a risk appetite perspective, they always try and bill health insurance first, and they usually get between $15 and $20 back from reimbursement if it's accepted. If it's rejected, they're actually able to do cash pay for hire on their own preferences. And so, for instance, the walk-in clinics we do, they have a higher risk appetite for just potentially doing cash pay for something that's reimbursable. So they actually do a straight to cash pay. And then from the payer perspective, we have been trying to break through with insurance payers for the last 10 years. It is finally starting to happen in the last 3 years. Who We Play For has been funded to screen all of Leon County, Florida from insurance payers because they see the value in the preventative screenings. And so from that perspective, Eindhoven doesn't rely on any future reimbursement model or more, because and many will know, but you can reimburse an ECG for things like family history or chest pain, all those things. And then it is not within our exact business model to carve screening ECGs into reimbursement plans. It would be great if it happens, but it's not something we're reliant on.
Dr. Murat?
So I think you made a big emphasis on the pediatrician screening, and I think that will require an overread where otherwise we already have the ECG machines typically provide an automated read as well on top of the physician read. I would argue that the terrible death that you witnessed was it happened to somebody who wasn't seen by a pediatrician before. You would argue really where you want to make the biggest impact is going to be community screening, and that's where you would want to integrate it. And the physician or patients or potential patients never see a provider in the first place. How are you going to tackle that, if at all?
Yeah, great question. And did the microphone work on that one?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think we're good.
On that topic of community-based heart screenings versus in-office use, we've been doing community-based heart screenings for 10 years. It's been a really successful model for us in Florida. We have the first 9 counties that strongly recommend ECGs for athletes. What we know for sure is this cannot scale to 14,000 counties in the U.S. The only way this ever becomes a standard of care is if it's absorbed by the existing healthcare infrastructure, pediatricians, walk-in clinics, Walmart, health centers. So I agree that the main thing for us here is to kind of target communities one by one to make sure there's follow-up resources available before bringing this tool to their space for that reason. And community-based heart screenings have been great, but they just can't scale to 14,000 counties.
Looks like Jeff?
And Zach, an add-on to that, I mean, will you need to deploy ECG machines in the pediatrician office? I assume most of them don't have this capability to do a 12-lead or whatever lead you need to run your algorithm.
That's right. And so on the question of ECGs maybe currently existing in pediatricians' offices, it's been a really emphasis point for us on the research the last 2 years. Rafe's pediatrician is the same pediatrician that we had growing up, Dr. Lisa Cosgrove. She was the head of the Florida AAP for the last couple of years. We've gotten varied estimates. Maybe half is the highest estimate we've gotten of pediatricians with ECGs already in office, some around 25%. And so for those that already have it, we're adding a new service to their capabilities. And for those who don't, we've been really lucky with the breakthroughs in ECG machine technology that make them much more affordable, much easier to access. This model wouldn't have worked 20 years ago, probably because of ECG machine barriers.
Dr. Peterson.
Yeah, I'm going to push you once again back to Murad's question. You know, if you really want to scale to the rest of the U.S., conceivably going outside of the pediatrician's office might be the right answer. Go to Walmart, go to CVS, you choose your weapon and install the technology there as a screening tool, low price, high volume.
Yeah, amen. You're preaching to the choir on that. If we could get Walgreens and Walmart to move quicker, then we might get those contracts signed faster. That would be the dream.
Are they in the crowd? Walgreens, Walmart?
If it's,
Okay. I think we're going to have to end it there. Big round of applause for Zach. Outstanding. All right. So we've got some empty seats. If anyone wants to sit down, it's going to be a long day. You're at 8HA. You want to take a rest. Very exciting. You can see how difficult these questions are. This isn't fluff. Hey, how are you going to save the world? This is great stuff. I'd like to now introduce Christine from, well, I'm sorry? Catherine. Oh, my God. Let's start that over again. Take two. Catherine from CardiX.
Hi, everybody. I'm Catherine Liao, and it's great to be here with you today. I'm looking forward to the opportunity to tell you a bit about the ability to monitor your arterial health with a solution that we are taking to market. Very quick disclosure, I work for the company. I joined the company about a year ago through the acquisition of my startup, where I led the development of a cuffless blood pressure sensor, and this is adding into the technology pipeline for CardiX. And you may have come across AtCor or SphygmoCor in your research lives. So for anyone that's been involved in cardiovascular and central hemodynamic research, you may have used this technology throughout your career. In fact, there are over 11,000 researchers that have published over 2,300 papers, and hopefully some of you are here in the audience today. The company was restructured in 2018 into CardiX with the goal of taking the technology out of research and then applying it into clinical care and home health. And so what we effectively have successfully completed is taking the SphygmoCor technology of measuring central aortic hemodynamics, putting into a connected home blood pressure cuff that you see here. Now, in learning from these researchers in the papers over the last 20 years or so, what we learned is that early vascular aging is a problem that is gaining traction and needs to be addressed. Because when we see that artery starts to age prematurely due to the loss of elasticity and so on, that is creating stress and basically leads to a higher occurrence of cardiovascular disease. And this study from the Malmo Cancer and Diet Exercise study of about 3,000 subjects actually found that someone with early vascular aging are 3 times more likely to experience a cardiovascular event. Now, for those that have done a great job of managing their lifestyle, you can also delay vascular aging, and the occurrence of events is half of what someone ages normally. So this is where we see the opportunity. What if we can add arterial health assessment at the point of care? So then, instead of simply assessing arterial health or heart health through blood pressure, let's also take a look at central blood pressure and arterial stiffness, so that to complete that holistic view of cardiovascular health. And so at that point, when we can diagnose with more information, and then we can apply the right intervention, because is your high blood pressure due to central blood pressure being high, or it's actually isolated brachial hypertension? And for us, it's really integrating, taking that knowledge and then also integrating AHA's Life's Essential 8 to really enable both the clinicians and the individuals to really take action. Because you know what? One thing that I found really powerful, it's one thing to tell someone that, hey, 140/85, your blood pressure is kind of creeping up there, versus the, ooh, you're 45, but your arteries is like, 55. Like the action, that the emotion that happens, really, I've seen people wanting to anchor with that number and say, I need to do something about it. And as a connected device, which most devices are now, we can tap into the remote patient monitoring regimen. Patients take this to home. They can now proactively monitor their health. And the value proposition is quite straightforward. First of all, there's a reimbursement code. There is a CPT code specifically for pulse wave analysis that Medicare has approved, and it's currently in about 35 states. In addition, and that's, by the way, that's unique to our device. And then we can also, because we are also a blood pressure monitor, we can tap into the existing RPM codes as well. So secondly, we don't require any changes to the clinical workflow. You got a blood pressure cuff, let's just replace it with ours, and we are good to go. Now, once we have that holistic central and brachial information as well as arterial stiffness data, we can now personalize medication, because we do know that antihypertensives impact central blood pressure versus brachial blood pressure differently. So now we can apply a personalized precision medicine to every single treatment. And then lastly, the future that we see is that we really want to enable early detection and precision intervention using central aortic biomarkers to do so. Business model is that we view this as $50 a month, the device sold in packs of 5. And so what that means is that starting, any clinic could be outfitted with simply spending $250 a month. And with the reimbursement, by seeing 16 patients, that solution has paid for itself. And for remote patient monitoring, the device is cost neutral because it's priced to what CMS reimburses for a connected device. The growth strategy is that we first focusing on specialist cardiologists, so specialist clinics with cardiology, nephrology, with a new focus around maternal health. Then taking it into primary care, but starting with integrative primary care to learn from them, because through that learning, what we're able to do is scale that into really managed primary care organizations, into employer groups, and then ultimately Medicare and Medicaid. And what we want to be able to do is impact the 1 billion annual visits to the doctor's office here in the US. And what we want to do is really close the gap in the health span and lifespan gap. By intervening early, we can push early vascular aging into normal vascular aging and enable everybody to lead a longer, healthier life. And before I also want to mention is a clinical priority, as you had heard that I've mentioned maternal health. We are a finalist in the maternal health RADx challenge, where that we're actually preparing, taking our device and sending it into the NIH's home lab for testing on pregnant women, actually starting this coming week. And my presentation wouldn't be complete in the last 10 seconds is that without talking about the wearable that we have in action. So what I have in my hand is that we can actually measure arterial stiffness parameters on the go. And I would love to show it to you after the talk. Thank you.
Outstanding. Thank you. Well done. Well done. Judges, Ken?
So great presentation. 2 questions. One, it looks like you're able to leverage 2 different reimbursement codes, which is great. Are you going to go after any new codes? That's the first question. And then second, any patents, and are you able to protect this in any way to prevent others from just copying what you're doing?
Wonderful question. So reimbursement codes and patents. So in terms of going after reimbursement codes, for us right now it's getting expansion for the code that we have right now, and that's the priority. But certainly as we learn new use cases and new utility, we will have the health economics data to justify that. From a patent protection perspective, we have 23 granted patents covering the use of using sensors to capture and translate to a central aortic waveform and extract biomarkers out of it.
Great. Awesome.
Dr. Harrington.
How are you going to convince doctors that this really adds to what they need to know? I mean, they got the blood pressure, they got all the cardiovascular risk factors. Aren't they going to just proceed ahead with counseling, et cetera?
Ooh, will the doctors use it question?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I will be very transparent and frank. This is why we are here, and this is why we want to spend time with the AHA. We need your help, right? So often have I heard that we know this, we need to change the standard of care. Yes, we want to do that, and we need your assistance to do so.
Outstanding.
Dr. Schwam? A little bit of a follow-up from Bob's question. I think it would be useful, if you haven't done it already, to look at the population of patients who have a relatively normal blood pressure, but an abnormal signature. If there's a substantial portion of those patients, then I think you really are adding something. But if the frequency of that is very low, and most of the patients who have an abnormal aging signature also have well-established hypertension and other risk factors, as Bob says, they're going to be put on their Life Essential 8 package anyway. So, have you looked at that? The patients who wouldn't otherwise not receive the same degree of attention.
Absolutely, it's a great question. So for those that didn't hear, is really looking at isolated central systolic hypertension, and so I'll offer you two answers to that. So first, literature has shown that there is a percentage of population that will have isolated systolic hypertension. And in fact, the Artery Society had issued a statement with Dr. Ray Townsend, talking about the utility of central aortic assessment in that. Now, another thing that actually people haven't really talked as much about is really in patients that may exhibit elevated brachial blood pressure, but they actually have a normal central blood pressure. And that's actually a larger population. One data set I looked at, it was probably about 30% of the patients. And again, this is just me looking at data, so not reviewed whatsoever. And I see that as an opportunity to address overtreatment as well.
As you've thought about your business model, have you considered licensing your patented technology to existing suppliers of blood pressure cuffs? The idea of getting practices to replace their blood pressure cuffs and use your new and improved offering is somewhat a significant challenge, especially if it's one where you're saying you have to run these procedures just in order to break even on this $50 a month model. So what if you were to become the Intel Inside for the other manufacturers?
We already can be. In fact, we are the Intel Inside of the device that you saw. So what we have done is that we packaged the SphygmoCore tech into a chip. And in fact, that chip then can go into a device that wants to produce the parameters that we want to produce. We have successfully integrated that with Centec Medical that has an ambulatory blood pressure monitor. So there is an ABPM out there that will produce the parameters that we produce. And we are always welcome to explore partnerships for more because, hey Philips, hey GE, how about taking one of these and putting it into your boxes?
Heather?
Have you done any research into medication adherence from the patient perspective with having this information versus not having this information?
So the question was, have we done research into kind of getting patients' perspective on this? Very sort of anecdotally. So it's me. I have a device. I travel with a device. I've put it on a lot of people just since the device was cleared by the FDA right before the summer. And what really resonates with people is that, so first of all, people that are hypertensive, they know it, and they're stressed out about it, right? Like, number one thing is, well, my blood pressure might be a little bit high. And yes, and then when their blood pressure does read high, and I'm able to also add a context of augmentation pressure, augmentation index, and to be able to sort of say, well, your blood pressure is a bit high, yes, but you know what? How you're aging vascularly is actually within normal range for someone who is your age. And so that adds actually a bit of context to it. And they found that information really useful and also eases their anxiety associated with their blood pressure. Now, what do we do with that? I actually think you can actually create better adherence into antihypertensives and also really just giving that more information that people want.
Dr. Moat?
So I actually use one of your devices for research, and I publish on that. So maybe one of those 13,000
Excellent.
published.
But, you recuse yourself? No, I'm kidding.
Not on myself, but on my patients. But the interesting thing is that I think for broad adoption, you will not get around or some prospective study actually validating its use resulting in different health behaviors or outcomes, right? And I know there have been prospective studies in the space of heart failure, for example, but tell us a little bit about existing data looking at this perspective to change management. What data is out there?
Yeah, so first of all, I would invite you to come back tomorrow because I do have a few slides on some of the prospective RCTs that have been done, specifically around managing antihypertension. Now, we need to do more. For sure, there's no doubt about it. And again, my call out to you and also everybody else in the audience is that work with us to do so because we do need to get these things deployed. The first 10,000 units that we are producing will hit our shores in the coming months. Let's get it out there and get that data as quickly as we can.
Any other questions from our judges? That's not usual. Okay, all right. Excellent job. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
All right, so we'll give a couple moments for our judges to tally their scores for CardiX. Just want to remind people that may have just joined us, this is the Health Innovation Competition, Health Technology Competition. We welcome you. Today is our business pitch. We run a two-pitch format here with the Center of Health Technology and Innovation. Today will be focused on the business and opportunities, and tomorrow will be focused on science. So if you're thirsty for the clinical and evidence backgrounds for these solutions, come back tomorrow. We'll start again, same time, 11:15. Are we ready to proceed? Judges, we're good? All right, let's call up our next victim. CardiSense. Applause, applause, energy. Come on, folks. All right. Woo! Nice, like it.
Okay. Hey, everyone. You guys hear me? All right, there we go. Everyone, so my name is Amit Gupta, one of the co-founders and CEO here at CardioSense, and we're working on a non-invasive cardiac monitoring platform for heart failure management focused on building wearable technology for early pre-symptomatic disease detection and to help guide therapy. So as I'm sure many of you know, I mean, heart failure and managing heart failure is one of the biggest unmet needs right now. It's a huge burden on the healthcare system. It's a condition that 1 in 5 people are going to experience at some point in their lives. There's a tremendous amount of spend, projected to be up to $70 billion by 2030, and the majority of that spend is due to hospitalizations. I think it's estimated about 70 or 80% of it are the direct costs that are due, again, to the hospitalizations and the post-acute care. We see that there's over 1 million patients every year that are hospitalized, and the unfortunate thing is once these patients are hospitalized, they come back to the hospital fairly often. Within 6 months, you have a 50% readmission rate, and with each readmission, the chance of the patient surviving that acute event decreases. So, I mean, given this problem, there's been a number of different companies, a number of different research groups that have looked into different ways that we can try to manage this in a remote setting. Given that this is a progressive disease and the physiological cycle that actually leads to an acute decompensation event starts weeks before the patient actually starts exhibiting symptoms. However, with all the studies that have been done around different telemonitoring, connected cuffs, symptom monitoring, weight monitoring, there is yet to be a study that has actually shown an appreciable difference or reduction in hospitalizations. The only solution thus far has been implantable PA sensors or pulmonary artery sensors. So essentially, what these sensors do, they're implanted in the pulmonary artery of the heart about 3-4 weeks before an acute heart failure event. Due to the impaired pumping ability, there's a backflow of fluids that leads to an increase of pressure within the heart. And when you detect that elevation in filling pressure, the physician is able to prescribe diuretics to reduce the fluid volume. And there's been a number of studies done by CardioMEMS, some of the other experimental devices, Endotronix, Vectorious, and they've all shown, between 30 to 50% reduction in heart failure-related hospitalizations. The challenge has been uptake. This is a $25,000, $30,000 implantable sensor when you also include the procedure. You look at CardioMEMS, they got approval in 2015. Lifetime, there's been maybe 30 to 35,000 implants. You talk about 6 million heart failure patients in the country, 1 million that are hospitalized every year. It's a very small fraction that really gets to benefit from this hemodynamic guided therapy. And that's where we fit in. Essentially trying to develop a wearable alternative to extend those same exact benefits to a much broader population. So we have developed this wearable sensor that uses a combination of different sensing modalities. Those signals are sent into our ML pipeline, and we're able to estimate a number of different hemodynamic pressures, including intracardiac filling pressure is the exact same parameter that these intracardiac monitors can assess. So an early feasibility study done at UCSF with about 70 patients, we were able to show a very high correlation to the gold standard, which is an invasive Swan-Ganz, along with a comparison to the standard of care. We were fortunate to receive the breakthrough device designation from the FDA, and we are currently working on expanding this study to further validate this and prepare for a regulatory submission in the next 16 months or so. So in terms of technology, and we'll be talking about this a little bit in more depth tomorrow, but what's unique about our sensor is the inclusion of a mechanical signal known as a seismocardiogram. So if you think about heart failure, fundamentally, this is mechanical dysfunction of the heart, and there's been a number of non-invasive approaches which have tried to detect this. However, when you're trying to detect this using only an electrical signal or an optical signal, you're still missing kind of the core ingredient. What the seismocardiogram is measuring is essentially these really small chest wall vibrations that are happening on the chest wall as blood is flowing through the heart. And the different peaks and valleys of this wave actually correspond to different valve opening and closings. So what our ML engine does is it essentially ingests the seismocardiogram wave alongside the electrical and optical signals, puts it into our ML pipeline, and that's how we're able to estimate these hemodynamic parameters non-invasively. So in terms of the workflow, there's a number of different applications. The first use case we're looking at is in the post-discharge monitoring workflow, where patients that are admitted for acute decompensated heart failure will be equipped with the sensor and a companion app, and they will essentially wear the device at a frequency prescribed by the physician. They will take the reading, it will be sent up to the cloud, back to the provider. As we can see on the bottom, following the same exact therapeutic protocol that these implantable sensors have established, once their filling pressure surpasses a pre-specified threshold, a clinician will reach out to the patient, prescribe diuretics to reduce that fluid volume, and the hope is to reduce that hospitalization as these implantable sensors have shown. So if you think about the landscape and, again, kind of what we're trying to do and how we try to differentiate ourselves, as I mentioned, I mean, there's a number of companies that are really looking at the heart failure space. Our focus, again, is on how do we reduce acute decompensated hospitalizations due to congestion. And fundamentally, again, the gold standard for measuring this is filling pressure. The only way to date to do that is through an implantable sensor. So by trying to provide a non-invasive approach, we are building on some of the existing clinical evidence that has been generated and trying to expand that to a much broader audience. I think another part of this, too, to highlight is that while there's been a lot of companies that have developed wearables and different AI, kind of risk indices, multivariate risk scores, the challenge is always what do you do with that data? What is the clinician supposed to actually change in the patient's care? By building upon an existing vital and not introducing a new parameter, we can, again, build upon some of the existing evidence and integrate this seamlessly into existing workflows today. In terms of the business model, we're initially looking at payers and at-risk providers, looking at a value-based model when you look at the reduction in hospitalizations. So building on the evidence that CardioMEMS and the other implantable sensors have shown, you can reduce these heart failure-related hospitalizations from anywhere to 30 to 60%. Let's just take, here an illustrative example of a 1,000-patient panel. The average cost to treat each one of those patients is about $24,000 a year. When you subtract the reduction in hospitalizations for heart failure that this could theoretically provide, you're looking at nearly $10 million of added value. And we look at essentially approaching the market with a services-based model that'll be able to take a large portion of that value that's created. So quickly just on our team in the last 10 seconds, we are fortunate. Two of our faculty co-founders, Dr. Omar Anand, will be presenting tomorrow, and Dr. Mazi Adamati. They've been working on this technology for the last 15 years, and we've been building out the team over the last few years with various industry folks to really bring this to the next step.
Here I come. Great job. Apologies, I misspoke earlier. CardioSense.
No worries.
Judges. Ken, please.
So you're tackling a really difficult issue, but a good one to tackle. I think a lot of people have tried this unsuccessfully. How are you going to prove the diagnostic accuracy of what you're trying to do? And that's number one. And then number two, how do you plan to commercialize it? Are you going to try to build your own sales force or collaborate with one of the device players or diagnostics players?
Yeah, no, there's great questions. So I think to start with, it really goes to what is the parameter we're trying to provide the physician and how are we validating that. So we're currently running a 700-patient study validating our algorithm's output to a Swan GANs, which is the gold standard for filling pressure measurement. I think that's where we're trying to distinguish ourselves is, again, not introducing a new vital, going straight to the invasive measurement and show a strong correlation to that. Once we're able to complete that trial and show the technical validation, we'll run a more traditional outcome study to be able to demonstrate the benefits to try to simulate what CardioMEMS and other implantable sensors have done. In terms of business model, I think it's a great question. I mean, initially, we are looking to partner with folks that have built out that services infrastructure. I think when you talk about heart failure, there's really two key problems. One is how do you accurately detect this in a remote setting? That's a technology problem. The second is what is the staff that's actually looking at the data? Who is reaching out to the patient? And that's where you have a number of companies that are building out virtual cardiology services. So we think we have a really unique technology value proposition to bring to them, generate some evidence, and then in the future we maintain that optionality to build out our own or continue partnering with others.
Excellent. Dr. Schwam.
First of all, great presentation, and your medical literacy is to be commended. You've really done your work. I guess my interest is in how you're going to differentiate yourself, which it seems is really around primarily the cardioseismogram as adding this key differentiating covariate. But I think the other place that many of these programs have faltered is in integrating that with some kind of continuously supervised clinical protocol that actually gets patients to implement what we know is the evidence-based therapy. And so are you thinking at all about that next piece of the pipeline, which is not just the sensor, but the whole wraparound protocol, which could be coupled with the sensor in an application?
Yep, no, absolutely. And as I mentioned, that's really the second part of this is, what is that services element that you can wrap around this technology? And I think we're looking at this in two phases. Initially, again, partnering with other virtual cardiology providers. Given this technology doesn't exist right now, we think it's a very big value add to them where they built out the infrastructure. They may be looking at hypertension patients, diabetes patients. We can bring heart failure patients into that workflow. Long term, we're actually looking at potentially a self-management paradigm where a patient gets discharged with this for maybe about 3 months. There's a calibration period with the physician. They establish a set of rules, and they have a companion app which can essentially give the medication recommendations based on the filling pressure output. And long term, we think that'll help solve some of the labor challenges that are around many of these remote companies.
Yeah, I think that's you're mapping out a really nice long-term strategy. You're going to have pretty significant backing by your funding partners because this is a long journey. You might also think about, rather than just validating against patients who are getting a PA catheter placed, which already identifies them as perhaps a different group than the ambulatory cohort you're going to manage, you might also think about identifying cardio-MEMS patients who exist already and getting more continuous and repeated measures of your device.
Yep, no, it's a great point, and that's actually one of the sub-studies we're hoping to kick off towards the end of next year, is essentially discharging patients that have CardioMEMS already implanted and looking for a 30 to 90-day episode and comparing our data to theirs.
Additional question with regard to thinking about competition. There are a number of other wearable devices that are collecting a whole host of parameters. You had listed, I think, 7 or so on the slide. You're looking at traditional competition, but how do you see some of the other wearables that are coming forward that might be able to capture some of the measures that your device is capturing and others? And a follow-up on that, I understand that right now as a breakthrough device, you need to be prescribed in order for the patient to use it, and if you could clarify that. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, so let me kind of tackle the second one first, where, yes, this would have to be prescribed, and one of the reasons it actually does have to be prescribed is because of the parameters that we can measure. It is, again, intracardiac filling pressures, or specifically pulmonary capillary wedge pressure, which is a vital that can only be measured through a catheter-based procedure today, and the FDA actually doesn't allow patients to do that themselves. So when we think about how we differentiate ourselves from the competition, I think it starts with the output of our device in the algorithms by not introducing a new vital into the workflow. So this is a vital that has clinical evidence that when you guide therapy using that vital, it will reduce hospitalizations. Now, you do have several other companies that are trying to develop wearable sensors that can measure the same vital as we can. And then I think it comes down to IP. It really comes down to the data set that we've been developing and really the team. When we talk about the seismocardiogram, there's maybe 24 people in the world that really have experience with the signal. I mean, we're fortunate to be working with the world leaders, one of them that you'll be hearing from tomorrow, Omar Nan.
Star.
I'm questioning what happens to the people who are not technologically savvy, who don't have the level of access to technology, because the patient would really have to be active in this kind of device usage. So if you send me home with this device, I have to, one, have access to the software, two, have the knowledge base to use it, and three, have the community support and infrastructure in order to access it. What happens to those patients?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. And I mean, I think this is, as we go forward, we think about the technology, but how do we make this usable, and specifically looking at the population itself. So I mean, I think to start with, again, this is a very simple wearable sensor that goes right on the sternum. So it is very easy to apply. There does need to be some training involved. That's why we want to start with the post-discharge flow and the patients in the hospital, and we can train them. The second piece is there's actually no software the patient has to interact with. All they're using is the device. The device sends the signals up to the cloud, and then it goes to the clinician, whether that's at the hospital or some third-party service. So we're actually minimizing what the patient actually has to do outside of just placing the device on. Now, in terms of getting the device hooked up in their home, we hook it up to their Wi-Fi network, so it'll automatically be sent up. So there is some initial kind of configuration to get everyone set up. But after it's set up, it's very easy for the patient. Just every day, they take the device once, place it on their chest, reading is sent up, and someone will reach out if there's an issue.
My question also has to do with that access to technology. You know that for the vast majority of marginalized communities, access to Wi-Fi can be problematic. And so one of the things that the AHA is tackling is health inequities in that way. So I was just questioning whether or not you had any concept of how that works in reality versus, in theory of what you're planning.
Yeah, that's a great question. And specifically on the Wi-Fi and internet connectivity, long term, we actually want to add cellular connectivity. So actually, the chip that we're using does have that natively. So it is kind of another technological feature. There are obviously security concerns, and we have to figure out kind of from a HIPAA standpoint how all of that works. But long term, we want to actually be able to do this without having native internet connectivity, and it could be sent over a cell signal.
So a quick practical question on placement for the patient. So the patients are placing it on themselves at home. How often is there issues with placement? Is there an indicator on the sensor to let the patient know? Because again, the data is being sent somewhere else, so they're not seeing, the inaccuracy or the data issue.
Yep. Yeah. No, it's a great question. And in general, the studies we've done have shown it's very robust, where it does have a good amount of tolerance. That said, actually, one of the key patents we have is around what's called a signal quality index. And with the companion app, that can actually help guide placement. So essentially, the patient will put the device on, the app will give a feedback and tell them, okay, move it to the left, move it to the right. And that is, I think, going to be a critical part as we send this to home to patients.
Any other questions? Outstanding. Round of applause for CardioSense. All right, so while the judges are finishing collating their results, I was wondering also to try to maybe get you guys a little bit moving around. Can you just wave to my son Milo, because he doesn't believe I actually do anything. And so I was just wondering if I could get a picture. A little bit more. Say hi, Milo.
Hi, Milo.
Awesome. Thank you. That's great. It's good. Are we ready? Are we ready? Outstanding. So I'd like to welcome up Paramus.
Heart failure. All right, here we go.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
It's okay. I'm Zina Kwan, the CEO and co-founder of Paramus. Thank you very much for this opportunity to tell you a bit about the work we're doing on wearable devices to try to enable better blood pressure management for a number of people. Just a disclosure, I wear many hats. And
You're going to move around. Use this one.
Thank you.
It's on. It's all ready. Just go.
Hello?
Keep it close.
Okay. So just as disclosure, you've had a chance to read. I have many hats at Paramus, so I have a very vested interest in making it successful. Our studies were supported in part by a number of grants and awards, particularly from the Pediatric Device Consortia and also from the CIBR Awards programs at NIH and the Air Force. So the problem we're trying to tackle is to help people manage their blood pressure better. This shouldn't really be a problem since there are many very well-established protocols and plans for how people can control blood pressure. But one of the things that's lacking is that there tends to be not enough information. People aren't willing to take the blood pressure measurements they need, or it's very difficult for a number of people to get sufficient measurements that are convenient and accurate. It's been pointed out by Forbes that a wearable blood pressure system would be the holy grail of health monitoring. And this is also reflected in the technical literature. The editors of Hypertension Journal have suggested that maybe different types of blood pressure measurements might be necessary to make it more feasible for people to actually practice the blood pressure management guidelines. And it's a big problem. Over 1 billion people around the world suffer from hypertension. Probably half of you guys out here suffer from hypertension. And your chance of dying from this double for every 20 points increase in your average blood pressure values. The question is, how do you know what your blood pressure values are? There are only 2 standards today of measuring blood pressure. You're all familiar with cuffs. A lot of people find them uncomfortable and are inconvenient to take. And so there's very poor compliance. And in addition, some people don't really trust the numbers they get, because if you take the blood pressure cuff measurements multiple times, you'll get lots of different answers. And a number of patients I've talked to say they just keep taking it until they get a number that they'll be okay telling their doctor about. To truly monitor blood pressure, you insert a catheter into the artery. Obviously, this is an invasive, painful, and expensive process, and most important, it exposes your patients to a number of risks of complications, because after all, you've made a hole in their artery. So our solution is somewhat different. We're one of the wearable crowd. We wanted to make wearables that are easy to use and comfortable to wear, that provide non-invasive data that has accuracy similar to what you'd see in arterial line monitoring. And this is the type of product that we made today that I'm proud to say was cleared by the FDA this September. And so now it's starting to be commercially available. Our devices are non-invasive like cuffs. They provide continuous data like A-lines. They're easy to use by anyone with minimal training. They're accurate, low cost, and comfortable to wear like nothing else out there today. And we've designed them a product roadmap for patients of all ages, ranging from 1-pound babies up to 98-year-old seniors. I'm going the wrong direction. So we feel that our data will provide a safer alternative to art lines and cuffs, particularly a particular brand of type of cuffs or ambulatory blood pressure monitors that are recommended for diagnosing a number of blood pressure disorders. But fewer than 1% of the people who are recommended for this device actually end up using them. And so we think our devices will provide more timely, cost-effective, and personalized treatment for reduced labor costs, with reduced risk of complications or readmissions, and with higher compliance. And so I mentioned we created a product roadmap. Our first product is actually relatively small, though not that small, and we're focused on neonates in the NICU who are at risk of hypotensive incidents. And then we're moving from neonates to adults, and we're moving from inpatient to outpatient. Our second product is for postpartum women, for home monitoring of postpartum women. And then we've also started studies now for pre-admission care, for transport and emergency care. And so our approach is to increase adoption through adjacent markets and through moving to global markets, extending our indication to lower acuity care and home monitoring. And then we've tried to build in economies of scale in our devices because we've built all of our devices on a common hardware and software platform. We think this is overall a multi-billion-dollar market. We've chosen the stepwise approach because it allows us to get early revenues to fund future development. So our business model is a razor blade model initially. We sell monitors or mobile devices, which all of our algorithms are done locally. And then we have single-use bands at the moment. And so it's one per patient. They'll be sold directly to hospitals, initially to high acuity NICUs in the US, and it's positioned as cost savings over arterial catheters. In terms of sales distribution, we have signed an agreement with Centec, which is a European-based company that makes non-invasive respiratory monitors. And so they have a beautiful footprint in all the major NICUs in the US, as well as a number of hospitals abroad. And if we also have our own direct sales contacts through pilot studies, one of our investors, March of Dimes, and then also through the Pediatric Device Consortia. We've been reasonably cash efficient. We've brought this product to market from the benchtop for the baby product, and we've also been doing a lot of our development for the postpartum moms product through the auspices of the RADx program that Catherine talked about earlier. Our next raise, we expect to get to cash flow break even, scaling up the Bopley, moving to new indications of use, and also moving abroad. Just a few words about the company. We are spun out of Stanford with an exclusive license to Shannon Bao's research on electronic skin. We've built a team which is very experienced in product development. We've created this platform with proprietary hardware and machine learning algorithms, and we have a ton of data where we've collected data with our technology simultaneously with arterial line data. Lots of smiling faces on our team. We've worked together a long time, and some of us have been together for as long as 15 years now. And so we'd like to work with you all to try to make a better product, a better standard of care for blood pressure monitoring. It's gentle enough to use with babies and comfortable and easy to use by everyone else. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. I'm curious about how you're thinking about the cost of your product, and when you think about the alternatives, how you're thinking about that cost plus any additional benefits to what the status quo is.
So our cost in volume and scale, we think will be at sort of the equivalent to the low-end fitness bands. We're starting actually at some place that one of the nice things for us about starting in a hospital in the NICU is that we can actually charge a premium when we're at this lower volumes. So did that answer your question?
It does, and maybe a quick follow-up on that. The exclusive license to the technology, is it to a limited market space, or is it for all the indications that you showed as you kind of moved up the stack on your chart?
It's for all hemodynamic modeling.
Yeah, so great presentation. Appreciate you doing it. So some of the challenges we've seen, there's a lot of emerging innovation in the space. One is around diagnostic accuracy for continuous blood pressure monitoring, and then tied to that is how often does the device need to be calibrated? So if you could touch on those two topics, that'd be great.
So for the baby product that we just was just cleared and validated by the FDA, so clearly we make the accuracy standards that the FDA is expecting for continuous blood pressure, and it is for continuous blood pressure monitoring. Our baby product updates once a second. I'm sorry, I already forgot your rest of your question.
Yeah, so the second question, some of the technology that's emerging out there looks really good, but from a calibration standpoint, has to be calibrated so often that it's not necessarily patient friendly. So just would love to hear more about.
So the Bopley, the baby product, doesn't require external calibration.
Really? So there's no initial calibration either?
No.
Really?
We ask the clinicians to enter in some demographics. We like the age of the baby and the weight, but outside of that, we don't do any calibration.
And following up on that. Okay. Oh, so this is tonometry based, right?
It's capacitive sensing, and so tomorrow I'll go into a lot more detail. But it's a capacitive sensor. You could view it as being a very sensitive deflection sensor.
Got it. So does it apply pressure to the skin? It's not.
It's a very light skin contact. You can actually do it without skin contact. We just get better signals and more reliable updates with some level of just light skin tone. We use it on 1 pound babies, so they have very fragile skin, and so we can't afford very much pressure.
And so you already approved and also for larger adults?
Not yet.
Not yet.
We started with the neonatal indication of use to try to minimize the number of details that the FDA had to consider. So we're starting with a very focused market, and there are a lot of logistical reasons why we think the NICU market is a good place for a small startup to begin. But we are working that, and we are looking for partners to, in the postpartum care section and also in trauma and emergency care. So those will be for adults.
Well, thank you for the presentation. Very compelling. I think the neonatal indication is compelling. You have, babies where continuous arterial line placement is challenging, it's painful, it often requires replacement. But predominantly you're looking at hypotension in those children, right? So you're really looking at one side of this blood pressure space, and in the adult population, you're going to be looking at the other side. So generalizability of the validity is a really important question. I think the bigger question, though, is what do we do with the data? Let's say the device is highly accurate. What's your roadmap for actually trying to understand at the appropriate scale, size of population studied, what additional value does the continuous measurement provide to tailor therapy and change outcomes? Because I think that's going to be your big hurdle.
So one reason we started in inpatient care was because people know what to do with the continuous data, and we didn't have to do that level. For adult care, we're actually viewing it more that we would be providing periodic data rather than continuous data. So we can take, for the postpartum care product, we use exactly the same hardware, the same software, but instead of updating once a second, we update once an hour, and that enables us to use the same device, same batteries, to last for 6 weeks. And when we move into that space with periodic measurements, we're much more similar to the ABPMs. And when we talk to payers, we started in the adult space and then we gravitated to the pediatric space where, frankly, we have no competition. But on the adult space, the payers seem to be willing for us to consider using ABPM as our model. And they, at that time at least, were not requiring us to provide outcome studies. We just need to show the efficacy that our technology gives you accurate blood pressure values.
I think you may have answered my question, but it looked like, did I understand correctly that it was a 72-hour lifespan on the device?
For the baby product, we designed it as a 72-hour.
Is that because of the battery, or why?
Our batteries actually last longer than that, but it depended on the brand of battery and things like that, and so we sort of capped our usage there to 72 hours, but that's updating once a second.
Yeah.
And so we can dial that in. So if you want to use it as a cuff replacement rather than an art line replacement, then you can get several weeks worth of.
So I don't know the answer, but what's the average length of stay in a NICU? So does it coincide with the average length of stay, or is it going to require multiple devices?
So there are a couple answers to that. We looked at the historical art line data that we have available to us, and 72 hours covers something like 75% of the patients. Now that's kind of biased because there's a desire to pull an art line out of a kid as soon as possible. On the other hand, there's also some evidence that say the first 72 hours of life are the most critical for hypertensive disorders. And so I kind of envision that a next-gen product that we will offer will allow you to tailor your sampling times. And so you start out when the child is at the highest risk, and you take it very often, but then you could dial it down. Alternatively, for home monitoring, you start with it dialed down, and then if things look kind of odd, then you dial it back up so that you can actually confirm that your data, your trends or whatever on the short time frame are true.
So not in the NICU, but in another life, worked with pediatric ER physicians. They said getting the blood pressure was one of the most difficult things they had to do when a pediatric patient presented. So I think there's opportunities in the ED
That's
as well.
one reason we're starting on pediatrics. I once had a pediatrician who looked at our demo, and he just stood there watching it for half an hour saying, you need to do this, because, and the nurses say that trying to get the cuff measurement just makes the kids so mad or so frightened that you can't trust any of the numbers anyway. So.
Thank you. All right, so you made it to the halfway point. No, I'm kidding. We just have one company left. I do want to remind everyone that this isn't the only place that innovation is happening within the AHA Scientific Sessions Conference. We've got 13 amazing companies behind you check out their exhibits, their pavilions, interact with them, covering a whole wide range of technological solutions for different conditions. We'll be back here tomorrow, but I just wanted to remind you all that this is the Health Innovation Pavilion, but it's not just happening here on stage. So we encourage you, after the session's over, to make your way to the actual exhibits. And each of the finalists here have a high top table that they'll be staffing right behind you. So if you have further questions, feel free and be sure to stop by there. So we're in the home stretch. I will say that today we went in, I don't know, traditional alphabetical order. Tomorrow we will go in reverse alphabetical order. So there'll be lots of energy tomorrow for RCE. So, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for giving this opportunity to us. My name is Atandra Berman, founder and CEO of RCE, a heart attack diagnostic company I started back in 2018 after I lost my dad to a heart attack. And this was silent in nature, a second one in nature, and I felt there was a solution possible. What if we could look at the underlying state of the heart before it happened, when this was happening and people did not feel chest pain? We could actually reach those people. 200,000 such people each year in the US have a silent heart attack. And that was the genesis of this company. I'm an employee and a shareholder of the company. So let's look at the problem today. 10 million people show up to emergency departments with chest pain. And American Heart Association shows that about 83% of these are non-cardiac. So they can be acid reflux, they can have anxiety, chondritis, a host of reasons for which patients are in the emergency department for hours, sometimes 3 to 5 hours, because they're waiting for a series of blood draws. And these blood draws give measurement of a specific cardiac protein called cardiac troponin I. Now, this takes time and this compromises care. Delayed diagnosis for 5 hours not only delays the diagnosis in 83% of patients, it compromises care and early assessment in those 17% of patients who needed help. Occupying bed for 5 hours for all those non-cardiac cases also increases the cost burden unnecessarily for the hospital. So what has RCE done? We have reimagined the way biomarkers can be measured and monitored continuously with a simple, non-invasive infrared-based technology. So here's how it works. Once bedside, you place the device next to the patient and place the patient's wrist onto the sensor surface, and you secure the patient's wrist with the wrist strap band. You leave it on for 3 minutes. During 3 minutes, you get an infrared spectral scan that understands the acute composite of cardiac biomarkers that gives an instant cardiac assessment. So we took this technology and we took it through a series of scientific and clinical research with early translational research in about 150 patients that demonstrated correlation with high sensitivity cardiac troponin I. Following that, we went into 238 patients, multi-center trial, 5 hospitals, where we demonstrated in acute coronary syndrome suspected patients a strong delineation between elevated and non-elevated cardiac troponin. We also showed phenotypic association with underlying coronary artery disease and regional wall abnormalities. Most recently, we just completed a 809 patient normal range study where we showed, again, a strong area under the curve, 0.95, discriminating elevated cardiac patients or elevated troponin patients from normal, healthy patients. So the high negative predictive value points us in a direction where we see there is a possibility of using this in those 83% of those low-risk patients. And this will not only improve the ED workflow, it will potentially eliminate the second or third blood draws, potentially eliminate those 5 to 7 hours, potentially eliminate the anxiety all these people have. And not only that, improve experience and improve care for those cardiac patients. Our model to go to market is going to be selling this device to emergency departments. We'll sell to directors of EDs, and these people are very interested in using this in triaging patients, ruling out those high volume of low acuity patients that bring in anyways a very small reimbursement amount, and fast-tracking all those high acuity patients that really need care. Those are the patients that really bring in reimbursement. We'll charge a $50 per patient per test at the triage, which could be in the waiting room of an emergency department, or even upstream into urgent cares, ambulances, outpatient cardiology clinics. Imagine even the places like Walgreens, where people like my dad who might have felt they could have gone and gotten an assessment could do that. Most of the people who have underlying cardiac causes and show up with chest pain show up in the ED between 10 a.m. and 1 p.m., but their symptoms are reported from the night before. Imagine having access and health equity to this technology. Now, we imagine this technology has huge potential compared to anything out there because of its continuous nature of monitoring. So this can be used also in peri-procedure monitoring, into PACU, where we've done some initial work. Also, most importantly, like in the case of my dad, we can put this on patients with chronic angina patients. We can put it on long-term monitoring of many patients. Women are undiagnosed. They go with Prinzmetal's angina and many other scenarios where they don't even know why do they have recurrent chest pain. Chemotherapy patients where they get immune checkpoint inhibitors, and when they have myocarditis, there's almost a 25 to 50% mortality. Heart transplant, again, a huge area which has high reimbursement, and you need monitoring for weeks, months to look at rejection. Ultimately, we envision this technology can miniature into a bracelet into patients' hands. As we're going, we're building a foundational model layer. First time in the world, clinicians, payers, pharmaceutical companies, even patients have access to something unique. The insights from a longitudinal trend of cardiac composite biomarkers that represents underlying injury, underlying disease phenotyping, that gives insights towards biomarker discovery and better pharmaceutical drug development. Now, this would not be possible if we did not have a strong team. I was very fortunate when I was in medical school to learn about Dr. Jaffe, Dr. Greg Stone, and those people have helped me come this far. Also surrounded by a very strong commercial team with people who have had very strong exits and very successful. We have someone like Alison Kumar, who was at the FDA in vitro diagnostics for 15 years, and she's guiding the team very well with our scientific advisory board. Now, the path ahead, we're looking at conducting studies on the ACS front in about 1,500 patients, which takes us through a rule-out indication, and potentially also taking economic endpoints and submitting to getting an NTAP designation for reimbursement. Lastly, I just want to say that we are creating something phenomenal, a diverse set of pipeline of revenue-generating opportunities, which makes it very unique, stepping into the ED and then expanding from there into urgent care and ultimately homes, and really making this an exciting opportunity for our investors. Thank you again for this opportunity.
Great pitch, and I think really nice product pipeline. A similar question to what I asked before, thinking about what is the reference standard that you trained your supervised learning model against, or your machine learning model against? Is it elevated troponin, or is it something else? Because you alluded to the fact that this correlates well with troponin. But we know that a substantial portion of patients, when they first arrive, if they're early in the phase of their ischemic injury, will have a normal troponin, which is why we draw that blood several hours later to see if we're at the beginning edge of this. So do you imagine a scenario where this device is detecting something in the infraomic signature that is not troponin-based, or is in the presence of low troponin and still indicates high risk? Or is it really a surrogate for troponin measurement, and therefore you still may need to, quote unquote, keep those patients under observation for a longer period of time? So just would like to understand a little bit how you're thinking about that dissociation.
No, it's an excellent question, and you're right. The troponin kinetics is very interesting, right? It has a very sharp early rise and then a very slow clearance. And troponin in itself, troponin I versus T, has different clearances depending on, kidney versus hepatic. Now, our sensor, the current technology, looks predominantly at troponin. We also have additional infrared optics to look at other biomarkers. This was by design to look at other ischemic injury biomarkers that come out very early. So we've done study in preclinical models where we've infarcted, and we have taken blood samples. We have taken those to a core lab, done exosomal analysis to understand proteomics, to your point, mass spectrometry to see all the other biomarkers that can come out. But they have different pharmacokinetics of release and clearance. So we're very sensitive to your point. If patients were to show up right away at presentation, what happens? Or when we scale this technology eventually into patients with chronic stable angina patients, what is the very early changes from baseline? How early can this be? Is this prognostic or is this very diagnostic at a late stage? So we have to be very careful in investigating those. But so far, most of our work has been done correlating with troponin. So to your question, the short answer, I went a little long ways, but context is important, is that we do want to look at troponin. Troponin is well understood by emergency departments. We need to demonstrate value in those low-risk patients. So we're going to go with troponin first, but we do want to look at those biomarkers in the continuous trend over time.
So first off, I'll give you a lot of credit. I saw your presentation in the spring, and it was very impressive. And I applaud you for actually doing the research that needs to be done. It is a real clinical problem, as you've pointed out, and it's an important clinical problem with a lot of cost issues associated with it, clogged emergency departments, et cetera. My question has to do with your patent protection, and maybe it's following up on Lee's. Are the patents around the identification of the biomarker itself, or is the patent around the usage of that as a risk stratification tool? And would that matter?
We have both. The one that is issued and granted is twofolds. One is the underlying very unique technique, the optical technique of looking through the skin transdermally. So that allows us a broad spectrum of biomarkers. Then additionally, we have also patented a concert of wavelengths that allow us to specifically go after troponin and another ischemic biomarker. So we do have both of those. We have others, but this should answer.
I can actually see this working in minute clinics and walking in the door in Walmart, where the vast majority of just regular everyday people are. Do you see this as moving into a more community-based piece of technology also?
Yeah, I think when we got into this technology, our goal was to add value to people like my dad. I have heart disease in my family, and I have kids, and I always think about that. Sometimes I feel chest pain, and believe it or not, even doing this company, I'll drink water or sit back. But if I knew there was a $50 test just down the street, I would go ahead and do it. I wouldn't think about it. So yes, I think community-based and improving the equity of this access to patients is very important. So yes, it's very much possible that we could eventually, ultimately have this device show up in places like Walmart Health or One Medical clinics and places like that. I think it has to be understood first, although in the emergency department place where they clearly understand triage, they understand troponin, they have risk scores that can be used. And then as we move along, we can really understand the outskirts of it, right? The pharmacokinetics when they present early.
So emergency rooms and outpatient clinics, those urgent care clinics are the first
That
line.
has to be the first place.
Got it.
Said something like that.
So it's a business pitch, so I'll ask a business question, I guess. You mentioned, again, $50 per read. Is it disposable per read, or how do you justify a $50 use for something that seems you just have to wash it down, right?
So it's a wipe down. I didn't go into that, and our chief scientific officer will present that tomorrow. We are, again, creating value for clinicians, patients, and hospitals in providing the acute rise or fall of a biomarker, so the area under the curve. That value in 15 minutes, 20 minutes, instead of 5 hours is substantial. It is a data, so we're using the device as a vehicle for data as a commodity for these doctors. So we're charging $50. So yes, you wipe it down, but every time you do a measurement, there's a counter that goes up, and that's updated into the cloud and resynced with the EMR. So you have a counter. It's a database play of like a SaaS model.
If I could follow up on that. So when you think about the business model, the question is always comparing to the status quo. So the blood test is relatively cheap. It doesn't take long to process. It may take time to get it through the lab. But when you think about your $50 charge per individual who's being scanned versus the cost of the blood test, and then the cost to the clinic in terms of having this in place, just curious in terms of how you're thinking about convincing folks to use that especially in situations where the reimbursement rates might be different. So can you speak about that a bit?
In this business and my prior business, I've always gone to pricing based on customers. So $50 did not come from just a number. Blood-based troponin tests do get reimbursed $12 to $18 based on payer, so it's substantially low. The cost to the hospital is average $100 because it's not just the lab kit, the tourniquets, it's the time of the nurse, it's the phlebotomy, the use. Now, 10 million chest pain, there's a lot of patients. 83% of these, the indirect cost of stacking up an ED bed for hours is substantial. So the ED doctor or the director of the ED or the CMO are thinking, in a 12-hour shift, how can we quickly keep moving these patients so we can use that place? Most of the times you have overflow, you have boarding, EMS trucks come and dock and they get diverted. So there's a lot of revenue loss. So the way doctors or the clinicians in the ED are thinking is, if I can have a tool that can quickly rule out those high volume of low acuity, low reimbursement, which I'm not anyways gaining by keeping them 5 hours, I have a game. So for them, they would rather spend $50 to $75, which is still less than the cost because they're not trying to win on troponin. They're trying to win on the bed. And they're trying to get those high reimbursement cardiac patients $16,000 to $64,000 high reimbursement tests in.
The number one
Yeah, so great presentation. Some of the patches that are out there, the vital signs patches and other body-worn sensors that are infrared-based technologies have had some challenges with accuracy when it's darker skin tones. Are you having the same challenges, and do you have a pathway to overcome those?
Yeah, so it's a very, very good question, and this has been a question from day one. Our chief scientific officer is an optical scientist, and our scientific advisory board is dogged and going after looking at skin presentations, different skin thickness, different skin colors, tattoos. So all kind of confounders that we can expect. When we look at these, and we have included them in over those 1,000 patients, we've not seen any significance in difference in correlation. Now, we need to keep doing this and make sure that there is no effect of BMI or race or tattoos or other things that could have an effect, but so far, no. And the reason is because we're not using near-infrared technologies like your optics-based technologies for hemoglobin or pulse ox. We're using mid to far, which is more molecular vibrational spectroscopy.
Great, thanks.
So it has a higher penetration.
Outstanding. You did it. You made it to the end of the day one. Big round of applause for our judges. Big round of applause for our finalists. Don't go away. We have lots of programming coming up this afternoon. Lots of good stuff. Thank you so much for being here. I do want those. Yeah.